Hello there, my RPG lovers, and welcome to another video. I have been a fan of Larian ever since 2009, when I first discovered one of their games.
I'm flattered, but I'm afraid this is neither the time nor the place for frivolities and frolicking.
So I couldn't be happier for their colossal success with Baldur's Gate 3, and I'm looking forward to playing the new Divinity, of course. Larian never lacked the passion for creating unique RPGs, even before their first major breakthrough success with Original Sin 2. This company came to a brink of bankruptcy multiple times, but they managed to stay afloat by pure resilience and not giving up. I'm still a huge fan of this studio, even though the recent games are not exactly my most favorite style of RPGs. As you probably know, I mostly prefer action RPGs over turn-based, but at the end of the day, I'm a fan of all RPGs. Even some JRPGs, believe it or not, although I don't talk about those games on the channel, but that might change in the future. Divinity Original Sin 1 was the game that showed me how fun turn-based RPGs could be back in 2014 when it first released. Before that game, I simply didn't even bother with strategy turn-based games since I thought I'm not going to like that style of gameplay. And ever since then, I started trying out various turn-based RPGs when I got bored of action RPGs and other games in general. Up to this point, Larian already had a recognizable and established style, which you could find in all of their games, regardless of these creative differences.
What a nincompoop!
If we take a look at all of their RPGs, which I actually did a couple of years ago, you could see that Larian experimented a lot with the gameplay systems. The first and the second Divinity game were isometric ARPGs, which played similar to Diablo games. Even their cancelled RPG called The Lady, the Mage and the Knight was supposed to be highly interactable action RPG. Fast forward to 2009, we got the first 3D, open-world, third-person action RPG, which goes by the name Divinity 2 Ego Draconis, Dragon Knight Saga or Director's Cut. If it wasn't obvious already, Larian was never that good with naming their games. I mean, a lot of people will tell you that Divine Divinity is one of the worst names for a game ever, but it only goes to show you that's not so important if the actual game is good.
He will come!
However, the poor naming scheme would get even worse after this, which led to even more confusion. Up to the point where Larian had to put a giant disclaimer on Divinity 2's Steam page when Original Sin 2 came out. Well, it turns out Divinity 2 and Original Sin 2 are not the same game, believe it or not. This should be obvious to everyone that followed and played these games, but there are always new players who are discovering these games. Divinity 2 is quite possibly the most obscure Divinity RPG besides Beyond Divinity, and Larian's awkward naming scheme is one of the reasons for that. Even now, if you go to the Steam page of Divinity 2, you will find this warning I mentioned before. This is Divinity 2 released in 2012. If you're looking for Divinity Original Sin 2, please click below. Okay, how much money you wanna bet that a bunch of people bought Divinity 2 when Original Sin 2 came out because they thought it was, well, you know, Original Sin 2. Quite possibly a lot of people, I would say, otherwise Larian wouldn't bother with putting this giant disclaimer in the first place. And as a huge fan of Divinity 2 Ego Draconis, Dragon Knight Saga, Director's Cut, or however the fuck you wanna call this game, this always bothered me.
It cannot be. How did this happen?
More than it probably should, to be honest, but at the end of the day, this is just sad. This is one of rare RPGs that I replay on regular basis every year, and even though it was far from being perfect, it had so much charm to it.
Here lies Sleepy Joe, doing what he does best.
I would even argue that this was Larian at its peak, not when it comes to the quality of gameplay systems or storytelling. It was peak of Larian charm and silliness, I mean.
You are starting to vex me, servant of the serpent.
This time I'll see you in pieces once more, prostitute of the pervert. What the fuck?
Your tongue is still sharp as always.
It's not like recent Larian RPGs lack the charm, on the contrary, they have plenty of it.
Says here that goblinoids are obstreperous and malodorous. What's that mean?
But Larian started developing very mature stories on top of that. They evolved and improved their storytelling a lot, and they took an entirely different approach to the gameplay with the first Original Sin game. While Divinity 2 had some mature themes and storylines and a pretty dark ending that I won't spoil of course, it was far from the maturity of Original Sin 2 or Baldur's Gate 3. The feelings and vibes you get from playing Divinity 2 was comparable to Fable games, while their newer RPGs are more comparable to the likes of The Witcher in terms of the tone. There are still plenty of goofy dialogue lines and characters in Larian new games of course, and like I said, the charm is still there. Larian still has an incredibly strong and unique method of making these games that you won't find anywhere else. But I really wish to see a remaster or even a full-blown remake of Divinity 2, or literally anything that would save it from being obscure, forgotten and serving only to redirect you to another game if you stumble upon it on Steam accidentally. Goddamn. Yeah, I think even Larian kinda forgot about this hidden gem of a game, although I can't even say I blame them because this is the game that almost bankrupted the entire studio. Even though it was, and it still is a very solid third-person open-world action RPG, it severely underperformed when it first released back in 2009. Not even the DLC Flame of Vengeance, which was actually pretty good as well, or the Ultimate Director's Cut version of the game managed to save it. After it was all said and done with this game, Larian completely changed their strategy when it comes to developing games in general. What they didn't change is the way they named their games, except Baldur's Gate 3 of course, but that goes without saying. After the massive failure of Divinity 2, Larian started developing two titles at the same time, Divinity Dragon Commander and Divinity Original Sin. At least one of those games should be very familiar to people, and that would be Original Sin of course. However, Larian had plans to invest a lot more money into Dragon Commander and make this game a priority, believe it or not. Now we all know that never happened, and somewhere in the middle of the development of these two games, Larian decided to go all out with their newest RPG, Original Sin, which ended up being the right choice, as we all know now. Once again, Larian tried experimenting with their new titles, especially when it comes to Dragon Commander. It's the one and only real-time strategy game from this studio, with some RPG elements on top of it, and of course the recognizable Larian charm.
What a nincompoop.
I don't think the name of this game is confusing anyone, even though it essentially is another Divinity title, which can't be said the same about Original Sin. A completely new title in the series, which would start the golden age of Larian. But that's not the only thing which this new title started. Original Sin basically created its own subgenre of Divinity games, which made a name for itself, literally. So even though Divinity was and it still is the main title of all mainline Larian games, except Baldur's Gate 3 of course, Original Sin became a more recognizable name. That's not so uncommon I guess. I mean, Oblivion and Skyrim would be a perfect example of this. The name Elder Scrolls is recognized for sure, but is it more famous than Skyrim and Oblivion? I don't know, you tell me. Speaking of which, naming your game as Divinity Original Sin 2 is like naming the next Elder Scrolls game as The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim 2. Well, not really, but you know what I mean.
It cannot be.
Divinity Original Sin basically saved Larian from the brink of extinction, and more importantly, it allowed them to show us their true potential. The sequel for Divinity Sin Divinity Sin? What? The sequel for Original Sin would help Larian break into mainstream for the first time ever, which earned them a lot of money and respect from their audience. They could finally show to the world what they are capable of doing with a decent budget. Even though that budget was not huge compared to some other titles, it was way more than Larian ever had. Original Sin 2 sold at least 7.5 million copies, but that number is probably even higher nowadays. So it's not so hard to see why the name Original Sin holds so much weight today. Then we got to see the biggest game yet from the studio, which ended up being a colossal success for Larian. Baldur's Gate 3 sold over 20 million copies so far, and it was all that people were talking about for a long time. Even now this game can reach up to 100k active players on Steam alone, which is madly impressive. In the meantime, the name Divinity and Original Sin got pushed to the side a little bit, but not for very long. When the newest Divinity title got announced, it only brought even more confusion. Well, more importantly, it brought a lot of excitement and hype for the new Larian game, that goes without saying. But a lot of people thought this is going to be Original Sin 3, and it's not. It's also not Divinity 3, even though it technically is. Okay, hear me out. Divine Divinity was the first Divinity, right? Divinity 2 was, well, Divinity 2, and if we don't count Original Sin as Divinity 3, because that would also mean that we should count Beyond Divinity as Divinity 2, which was obviously not the case, it would make sense if the new Divinity was Divinity 3. Yeah, simple. In defense of Larian, the name Divinity deserves more respect in general, so naming their new RPG as just Divinity is a smart move for the brand itself. Not so much for the players, who will keep getting confused, but who cares, as long as these games are great RPGs, like we got used to from Larian. After all, that's what matters the most at the end. The title of the new Divinity also implies that this will be Definitive Divinity. That's a cool name that Larian could use in the future. Definitive Divinity. Oh my god, please no.
I know you want to make the perfect game, but this is not the way!
But yeah, when you choose to have a simple name that was used before for 7 different games you've made, it goes without saying that the new game should be the game to rule them all. I mean, Larian even confirmed this by saying this game will be even bigger than Baldur's Gate 3, which is kind of insane. Again, imagine if Bethesda named their next Elder Scrolls game as just that, The Elder Scrolls. And that's it. Never mind that, but what about the future of this franchise? I mean, we have to mention that as well, even though it's a distant future. What about Divinity games after Divinity? Or should we say, beyond Divinity? Who the hell knows? The new Divinity is going to be a turn-based game, which was a little bit disappointing for me. That's because I was hoping that Larian would explore the action RPG genre once again, but it makes sense why they decided to stick with the turn-based system. After all, that's what brought in the massive success in the past, so it would only make sense to continue doing the same. But I just want you to imagine the possibility of a AAA, open-world, third-person RPG from Larian. That's really far-fetched, at least for now, but I still have hopes for the Divinity 2 remaster, or maybe even a remake, as a side project from Larian. I would love to see this studio start experimenting a bit more with their games, like they did before. From Diablo-like RPGs to third-person action RPGs, RTS, turn-based and D&D turn-based RPGs, Larian tried them all. The name Divinity means something a little bit different to everyone who stumbled upon at least one of these games. That's actually funny, in a way, even though they keep confusing new people who are becoming fans of these games. And with the brand new Divinity title on the horizon, it seems like we're gearing up for the strongest cycle of confusion yet. Being a little bit goofy and silly is the staple of Larian's game design, so is it really that bad to have a silly naming scheme for your games? Maybe it's even intentional, which wouldn't surprise me at all, coming from Larian.
Not a trick, my friend. Magic.
Or maybe they just suck at naming their games. As long as they're great at making them, who the hell cares, right? Whatever the case might be, Divinity games are truly something else, and all of them offer a unique experience. I'm currently working on a longer video about all Divinity RPGs, so stick around for that. Tell me your opinion about Divinity games and their names. Did you get confused in the past by any Divinity game, and which one is your favorite? Leave a comment down below.
Farewell then. It has been a pleasure.
Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. And if you want to go a step further, consider supporting your boy by becoming a YouTube channel member or a Patreon. Huge thanks to all my current supporters, and I'll see ya in the next one.